Good afternoon, Emmett.
Sandra, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Very good, actually. Really good.
I feel like it should call you birthday boy, right? It's your birthday today and still working.
True. This is true. Birthday. Yeah, I don't know. You don't take a day off for your birthday when you get to my age, right? 35.
No. I mean, I'm surprised you're even celebrating it. To be honest with you, something you probably want to forget, right? As you break into that 50 mark. So.
Yeah, I'm actually not celebrating it, to be honest with you, because I hate my birthday. So I'm like the most miserable person in the world every single year for my birthday. But I wake up and then there's balloons and all that kind of stuff in the house, which just makes it even worse. But never mind.
Perfect. But aside from obviously having a dreadful day today, how's the rest of your week been?
It's been awesome. I mean, like work's pretty busy, but more importantly, my football team are top of the league. And the last time my football team were top of the league on my birthday was in 1987.
Wow, really?
Yes.
That's a pretty amazing fact. I almost thought that warrants a t-shirt.
Mate, I mean, it's been awesome. So yeah, enjoying the ride.
Excellent. Well, that's good news. I mean, welcome everyone. Obviously, this isn't just a private conversation between me and Emmett. I can see a few people dropping in and just dropping in here over the next couple of minutes. So welcome to Digital Growth Show. For those of you, we can see some familiar faces dropping in. Welcome back. And for new kind of people, welcome. Thank you for kind of joining us this afternoon. This is our weekly Digital Growth Show. We're now on episode 22, right?
That's right. Yeah.
What's that in bingo? Swans? 2 swans, is it? I don't know. I'm not really. I've never been to bingo, so I don't know. But yeah.
Yeah. No, and I think actually, and I think this is also last week. I think was the first time that our podcast listens exceeded the webinar, which is pretty cool. Because
did it? Yes. Okay. Yeah.
Because I mean, genuinely, like all really good digital marketing strategists, the podcast was an afterthought.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
And so we just thought, actually, we got an audio file. Why don't we pop it up in the podcast and see what happens? But that's now just taken off. It's nuts. So I think we need to now kind of really kind of think about a strategy for that in itself. But all good, guys. We appreciate you coming on board. We're just gonna wait a couple of minutes. We'll chat away while we see some more people joining as well, which is awesome. But yeah, so today, Andrew, I should really ask how your week's been, right? I kind of just took it over because of my birthday and Everton and all sorts. So
that's it. Yeah, it's too excitable. Yeah. No. Mine's great. I'm continuing to enjoy the increase in traffic on the roads. So getting stuck in more and more traffic jams means that there's more and more people about working, kind of spending money in the economy. So I think all of that's positive. And so I'm still smiling even though I'm in traffic, which I guess won't last too long. But I'd like to enjoy it while I can. I mean, heading out to the marina last night, I think it took me the best part of 40 minutes because of the backlog of traffic. So that's cool. I went to a very touristy hotel last night that I wouldn't ordinarily visit. Being an absolute kind of Dubai expat snob, just don't go to the tourist spots. And it was busy. So that was good to see as well. Happy to see people coming back to town. So yeah, I'm in a buzzy mood, and I think the topic today is one of kind of today, and then also again 2021. So the idea is that this is the start of our 2021 series, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we're having more and more conversations now where I think people are now really starting to kind of look forward. It's funny, right? I mean, I guess for the last sort of 6 months, so much has been focused on the now. What do we need to do right now? How do we need to adapt? How do we need to pivot? It's been interesting. Whereas I'd say the last kind of week or two, I know I've had many more sort of conversations, really, where people have said, "Look, I need some help now for 2021. I need to understand, more about where I should be spending my money from a marketing perspective. Do our sales strategies need to change? Do we need to kind of think about new technology for next year? I think all of the things that perhaps people couldn't
it's
really
sidelined almost.
Yeah, exactly right. But it's nice. I think that's quite refreshing, and I think you've had the same sort of experience in the last week or two as well, right?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I think that as you said, a lot of people have just been. I mean, some people have been in survival mode. Some people have been in pivot. Some people have just kind of in growth mode. To be fair, but all of that is very much focused on okay now and kind of next month. But yeah, a lot more focus now on wherever we are now, it's not going away. So we need to make sure that we've got some plans in place for 2021, and there's enough data over the last kind of 6 months that should help inform some of those decisions, or kind of build towards them at least.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. So let's get started then, Andrew. I think the it's interesting because we both come from a time when we were, well, I guess we've been for the last 15 or 20 years having conversations with marketing people around this time, right? October, November.
Yeah.
We want to kind of lock down budget from them.
That's right.
For 2020, or for the following year, obviously. And it's funny because I think when we were kind of talking about this earlier, the quotes I always used to get from some of my kind of marketing friends were, when I'd say, "Cool, what's your budget looking like for next year?" and the answer was pretty much predictable year on year, right? And it would be,
yeah.
I'm just going to do what I did last year, but just change the numbers around a little bit, and it was like, but they kind of, tell me how they're locking themselves away in a room for, a week or two while they're trying to get all this done. But essentially, it was like a 10 or 15 minute job. And
that's right. Yeah.
And we were kind of laughing at that because, I just used to hear it all the time.
Exactly.
And my kind of response to that would always kind of depend on how much budget I got from them that year. So, if I'd had a relatively good year from them, cool, we're okay with that. As long as if they're tweaking it, let's make sure we get a little bit more next year.
Yeah.
And if we had an okay-ish year, then it would be a case of, right, I've got the next 5 minutes to perhaps try and convince them to give me a bit more.
Yeah, exactly.
But it was so predictable. But I mean, for years and years and years, it was always the same, right?
Yeah, totally. I mean, it was as you said. I mean, very little consideration of pretty much what was out there, or trying anything new, or really, kind of looking even down to kind of what competitors were doing. It was very much right. This is on track. Seemed to work this year. I'm hoping to get a bit of extra, like 10-15% extra budget, but I'll just put that over there. So and it's not. I guess it's not to diminish that role. It's just that, the powers that be that write those checks, I think have a similar viewpoint, or had a similar viewpoint, where it's just like, well, this is working, right? So, I mean, why would we change things? Like, let's not rock the boat too much. I remember talking to a very large hotel chain back in the day, and their strategy was like, we don't know what's working, so we just have to keep everything exactly the same. Right. Just in case we changed the wrong thing.
Well, I think that was it, right? It worked. Businesses were growing, people were doing well, and but yeah, very, very different from now, right? And I think that's I think the conversations that I've had in the last couple of weeks, it has literally been right, blank canvas. I think what's been consistent is there's been a reduction in marketing budget from the people I've spoken to. So budgets do seem to be a lot more sort of squeezed, but I think that also kind of presents opportunities. So whereas before, perhaps if you've got quite a kind of generous budget to work with, you perhaps do things without as much kind of thought or care, or I don't know, you just maybe don't do the right kind of level of due diligence.
Not so much the details,
Yeah. And so it's been interesting because we're working with, in some cases, 30 or 40% reduction in budget. But actually what I found interesting is there's been absolutely no change, or no reduction, I'd say, in their targets, right? So people are saying, right, we still need to generate X, but actually now what you've got is Y minus 30% to work with. And I think that's where it gets really interesting, difficult, sort of challenging, whatever you want to call it. But that's what I'm seeing right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think also the kind of speed that these conversations have happened at as well, I think is what I've noticed in the last month is the larger organizations, that kind of enterprise layer, and now the ones also that are joining the conversation, and kind of wondering how that change may look, right? I almost feel like, I mean, obviously, the smaller organizations and mid-sized organizations have had to think on their feet and quite possibly, really kind of just roll with the punches a bit more than the larger organizations. And I'm not sure, I mean, do you think that's down to sheer size or run rate on spend? I mean, what do you think?
No, I think it's a combination of those things, but certainly size plays a big role in that. We work with a lot of large companies, and they were like, actually, we're not going to change anything. And look, and a lot of that did come down to uncertainty. So again, a lot of businesses, our size, slightly bigger, slightly smaller, making changes in March, right? They were like, look, even if this carries on for 2 or 3 months, we've got to change something here, because this isn't sustainable for us. But I know the larger organizations, I think, like you said, that kind of speed of change was just at a very kind of different pace. And a lot of them just sat it out, said, okay, we're not going to make any changes. We're not going to, we're not going to reduce salaries. We're not going to reduce overhead, employee count, all of these things. It was like, we're going to keep it as it is because we can sustain that. And I think it must have been about sort of maybe June, July, when I think they started panicking a little bit.
Yeah.
Right. And at that point, actually, it was interesting because I think what they were forced to do was maybe be a little bit more aggressive than had they kind of made those changes earlier. I know kind of, again, that employee counts in some companies were really kind of drastically reduced.
Yeah.
Which was almost a little bit kind of, too little, too late. There's obviously a lot of businesses that have kind of failed and are continuing to fail during this time, right?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I mean, it's I think the thing is, and it's almost like, obviously, as we kind of come into Q4 now, and we do start preparing for kind of that Q1 of 2021. It's understanding, really, first and foremost, looking back, right, and kind of getting a real gauge on what's happened for your business, your competitors, your potential new customers, your existing customers, your old customers, because really that model of, as you just mentioned there, let's just kind of wiggle the numbers around, but let's do exactly the same thing. What we're doing in 2020, let's just do it same in 2021. Just isn't going to wash, right? I think obviously, even the organizations that have perhaps grown, have pivoted. I was talking to a textiles company this week that they supplied global textiles to some of the biggest retail shops in the world, and they had to pivot, right? No one was getting new clothes. No one was going shopping. All the shops were shut. The malls were shut. Everything's closed. So they pivoted to PPE and kind of all the masks and the gowns and all, because they were able to do that at speed and at volume because they didn't have other work. So, but we can't do things the same, and that especially is 100% true for your marketing activity in 2021.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I think those, again, when we look at again, clients of ours who had created budgets at the beginning of this year, negotiated sort of long-term contracts, and essentially we're still, there was a period when, I mean, obviously we were both in Dubai at the time, but there's no cars on the road, right? We needed a permit to leave the house. Yeah. And it was funny. I think one of those times when I did get a permit to go to the supermarket or something, I went past, I saw an outdoor ad, which I knew cost literally like, hundreds of thousands, right?
Yeah.
Phoned the client and said, why have you still got outdoor ads there? And they were like, contract.
Yeah.
Literally, no refund. It is what it is. I was like, there's nobody on the road. I mean, this is a road where you normally have maybe, 10,000 cars driving through it every hour, right? And
right.
from to go from there to zero, and you're still paying for that at that same rate. And they were like, it just kind of is what it is. And it's in a similar way, same with kind of radio advertising and things like that. Again, lack of mobility, I guess, is what we're saying, right? The fact that people weren't going to malls, the fact that they weren't kind of traveling anywhere, just meant that there was a whole load of kind of wasted advertising and marketing budget. Because again, essentially, why would radio stations say that we'll give you our money back, or or we'll give you any credit, because people can still listen to radios at home, right? But the reality is most people don't. So
we've still got some very old kind of marketing efforts here. Things even like flyers and bag drops. You still were seeing that before. I mean, it's almost comical. I kind of came into the office last week and somebody had actually put a flyer on the on the floor on the mat, and I found it comical, because basically I was like, well, I mean, who in their right mind at the moment is going to touch a random piece of paper? Right. Why would you even bother with that? But there definitely was a period there, and not only here, globally, where and now we're starting to see some of those lockdowns come back into place, where some of that marketing spend was just effectively wasted. I mean, you and I talk about an absolute waste of money with billboards and kind of traditional marketing anyway. But I think it really, when even in their own words, it's, X number of cars drive under this bridge every day. Well, guess what? I mean, it was like I've seen it at daylight at one point. There was no one on the roads.
No, and that's precisely it. And I think if going back to that kind of change and that speed of change, I think what we started seeing around that same sort of time, sort of June, July, August, was where, maybe slightly earlier actually, but from some of the larger retailers, was when they suddenly realized that they needed e-commerce platforms, and they completely sort of ignored it up until that moment, and had to then find budget from somewhere, because again, budgets were sort of set in stone. So I think sort of at June, July is when that really started sort of kicking off a lot more, and people were coming up to saying, "Look, help us out." Whereas
and they're still coming online. So you've got some kind of huge retailers that are only just now launching their online capabilities regionally, and not so much kind of obviously UK and US, but regionally here they were definitely slow on the uptake, because there was a heavy reliance on footfall in malls. So you see that across the board, and also a lot of independent retailers, so not just the large retailers, but the independent retailers, realizing that they need something to support the lack of footfall, right? People still are nervous to go outside, nervous to congregate in malls, perhaps, and that has a direct impact.
Yeah, and continues to do so, right? So yeah. And obviously, from a B2B perspective, I'd say more events. Obviously, we don't need to go into kind of too much detail here, but obviously the lack of events, lack of conferences, exhibitions, I think that's had a kind of significant impact from the kind of lead gen, relationship building side from I'd say pretty much every kind of serious B2B business, right? Because I mean, a lot of
we know firsthand. Sorry, mate, you cut out.
No, that's fine. But you're right. Yeah.
No, I was going to say, we know firsthand that you've got B2B organizations that their whole lead gen philosophy was, let's put on an event, let's get some people down here, let's have some nibbles, let's get a guest speaker, let's network, let's spend physical time with each other. And I remember talking to a few clients of ours. It was like, we invite the same people, have the same conversations, cost us a crazy amount of money. And kind of all of that's gone away, right? That ability now where you kind of that virtual events, and we'll talk a bit about that in a minute. That may not just be the answer, but that B2B space has been as adversely affected as B2C space, because people, organizations, individuals, companies, brands have had to try and rethink, how they market. to their potential prospects, and also like their customers, right? How do you remarket back to your existing customer base if that existing customer base has been used to coming to an event quarterly or annually, where they get a nice little plaque and a nice little, you know, goodie bag, and oh, you know, thanks very much, continue to do business with me. It's been tough.
Yeah. You know, and obviously there's been that kind of shift to digital sales because, you know, people still need to sell. But again, I think we'll kind of touch on that maybe this week and perhaps more so next week. But yeah, I think the reality is, you know, if we look at the role of marketing, you know, this year, but certainly moving forward to next year, you know, that sort of combination of whether it's brand awareness, whether it's kind of product awareness, whether it's lead generation, right? I think those things now almost need to be very clearly defined, very clearly understood, so that businesses can basically just, you know, understand exactly where they need to kind of start, you know, spending their money, while really understanding the impact of doing so, right? Especially if budgets are going to be reduced moving forward.
Yeah. It's
cool.
It's all about targeting and optimal spend, right?
Yeah. So look, I think enough about kind of where we are. I think everyone's kind of pretty aware of what we've all had to put up with. But I think moving forward, then Andrew, let's go into that now, because I think this is really why people are tuned in. But you know, 2021, I think is there's a lot of hope around 2021 at the moment. Okay, so again, based on conversations that we've had, every event that's been sort of cancelled this year, you know, people have started to talk about, you know, next year it's going to be you know, on this date, you know, this is the location. And, you know, I think we've got to kind of almost think about that in a slightly different way, right? Because I mean, the reality is everyone's been impacted. We were hoping that it will be over by now. Okay. I mean, the reality is that numbers are still kind of scarily high, and increasing, right? They're not decreasing at the moment. And so we sort of continue to be impacted, and we're in Q4 now, right? Where we're sort of, you know, just a few months away from 2021. And I think everyone's kind of hoping that this vaccine sort of, you know, gets introduced and spreads around the world. But I don't know. I mean, are we kind of crazy thinking that, Andrew?
I'll just put my doctor's uniform on. But I think we're crazy from a business sense. I think that, you know, that even, I'll be honest with you, I mean, I kind of had that hope where I was like, okay, you know, so the vaccine rolls out, you know, kind of people start to get comfortable. And it was a conversation actually with one of our previous guests, old Dr. James Pipeway, who said, well, bear in mind, this vaccination, for it to be effective, has to kind of cover 70% of the global population, for us to feel comfortable again to really kind of venture out, right, and not kind of rely on medical services, medical professionals, any kind of strain associated to that. So not so much bro science, but you know, kind of real. Almost like a smack of reality. So that's not to be negative or non-optimistic, let's say. But it's the realism that just because something happens, you know, tomorrow, that goes back to normal. But I mean, what do you think? I mean, if let's say, you know, ideal scenario, vaccine comes out, that miracle jab, as it were, and in some miraculous, you know, kind of space of time, 30, 60 days, we get to that, you know, 70% or whatever. I mean, do you think that everything just hits the reset button again? Do you feel like everyone just goes back to, oh yeah, UCAR, let's get one back in the office. Let's, you know, let's kind of, I'm going to fly off. I'm going to see you, Saudi. I mean, you're going to fly off to Manhattan just to make sure. We're going to fly back to the UK. You know, what do you reckon?
No, I think, and look, obviously we run a business, so we talk about this all the time. But I tell you what it is. I think, look, first and foremost, super dangerous. I think for anyone to assume that as soon as there's a vaccine, things go back to normal. Okay.
Yeah.
But I think if we start digging into that in a little bit more detail, I think what we've realized, and look, I speak from my own kind of personal experience in this. but I certainly have realized that actually COVID has introduced some really kind of good things into my life from a practical sense. Okay. And almost to the sense where I'd look at it and say, well, business was potentially broken before, right? The way that we used to do business, the kind of, things that we used to do day in and day out.
Yeah.
Why were we doing that? And I know that, this kind of differs from sort of, place to place and sort of culture to culture, but essentially, we would think nothing of getting up in the morning, spending 40 minutes in traffic to get to the office, then perhaps during the day driving around for another 3 or 4 hours, going to meetings which will maybe 15 minutes of real kind of content, but you end up spending an hour because it's taking you 40 minutes to get there, so you may as well spend more time there. The travel side of things, I mean, this is the longest that I think I've been in one place for a very long time.
Yeah.
But every 4 to 6 weeks, I was somewhere else, right? Whether that was in the States or the UK. And again, actually, our sales from the US are higher today than what they were when I was going all the time, because it's just different now, right? And I think what COVID has taught us is actually there's a better way of doing things. There's a better way of doing business. There's a better way to balance your your work-life balance. Nobody talks about work-life balance anymore, by the way. Have you kind of noticed that? It was, I don't know whether we've almost gone full circle with it, where it's almost like I need to get out because I'm spending too much time at home. But I don't know. I mean, it's kind of, it's changed, right? But it's changed in a way where I think we all feel efficient. Okay, we all feel productive. We perhaps don't need to now, get into the office for 8:30, 9 o'clock in the morning, sitting in rush hour along with everyone else in the city. I mean, now if I go to the office, there's no way I'm going to leave before 9 o'clock, because I know there's some people who still have to get in for 9. But why kind of spend that extra 20 minutes? Because I don't know, I felt as if I kind of valued my time pretty well before.
Yes.
And then I just feel like an idiot now because I obviously didn't. Like, honestly, that's the reality. So look, kind of long answer to your question, but I think certainly from our perspective at Nexa, certainly from my kind of personal perspective, if there's a vaccine tomorrow and suddenly, like you said, 70% of the world are vaccinated, and suddenly we're very comfortable kind of going out and about and living, normal lives in the sense of a word of what it was maybe 12 months ago, will it go back to normal? And for me, absolutely not. And for the better. I like the fact that we can do that, but I won't be doing that.
Yeah, I think it's definitely opened a lot of people's eyes to a different style of the way they work. And as you said, valuing time. You would jump on a plane for a meeting, not thinking about the kind of potential day, 2 days out. You would. I mean, I remember some punishing schedules that you put yourself through to kind of bounce back to the UK for a few meetings, and essentially, even when we used to fly in from the US, land at 7 o'clock in the morning, jump in the shower after a 15-hour flight, and straight in the office. Some of those things I think become glaringly obvious with this kind of new shift, and I think it's been, because it's happened globally, it's had that global impact. So I think just for we have a lot of viewers in kind of Europe and US as well, but just in this part of the world, there was a real kind of underlying I'd say process that you had to meet people. You had to press the flesh. You had to spend time with people. You had to get to know people. You had to build relationships. All of these things took time, and a lot of time out that basically wasn't straight down to business. So I mean, I'm speaking to a client earlier on today, in India, and I was saying I can't remember the last time I had a first prospect meeting in life. So everything is over Zoom, and that's not just obviously my agenda or Nexa agenda. That's the person on the other side of the table. So there's more acceptance from everyone to kind of realize that doing things differently is the right way now.
Yeah, Well, I think it's you know, we've touched on this, but accessibility is key, right? Because I think,
Yeah.
you know, and I think like what you said, because this has happened globally, everyone's kind of in the same boat. But I mean, it's funny. I had meetings today, for example, where I know that pre-COVID, these would have been face-to-face meetings. I'd have lost probably the best part of most of my day.
Yeah.
And instead, these turned into 2 lots of 20, 25-minute meetings.
Yeah.
With real kind of positive outcomes on the back of those, you know, and it's just it's an incredible game changer. But it's important, I think, for every business to understand that actually, you know, when you do kind of start looking forward and planning ahead, you've kind of got to take all of this into consideration, because
Yeah.
if you genuinely think that things are going to be the same, they're just not, right?
Yeah.
And you know, and that could be the biggest sort of dangerous mistake I think people can make, you know. And well, the second thing, I mean, we kind of touched on it before, but you know, I think staying sort of fluid and having very kind of dynamic marketing budgets, and we'll go into channels and we'll go into all of that stuff in a bit. But
Yeah.
you know, I think that's the key, because I think in this era right now, committing to, you know, 12-month sort of advertising packages, and you know, tying yourself into kind of long, difficult contracts to get out of, I think is really, like, I mean, nobody should be doing
Dangerous.
that, right?
Dangerous.
Yeah. You know, because we just don't know what's going to happen around us, and I think, you know, 2020 has shown us and kind of taught us a lot that, you know, these kind of mistakes, we wouldn't even think about them before, right?
No.
But today we have to. This is very much.
Yeah, I mean, previously, you know, the kind of, when we had obviously David on here talking about, you know, disruption and disruptive industries a few weeks ago, from Contractors Direct, you know, the fact is that we were all moving to a kind of Netflix world, you know, where I could literally just hop on and hop off whenever I want. And I think that, you know, this has shown that, you know, that yes, you can plan, and but you've got to have some elasticity in that. You've got to have some flexibility, right? You've got to be able to change, because who knows? I mean, you know, there are other kind of countries in the world now going on lockdown, right? That's it, right? So, you know, whatever plans you had or whatever activity you had, that's it, done. You know, it's done and done with.
Yeah, and that's without even going into maybe, you know, government support levels not maybe being what they were this year, right? Because that's not sustainable either. So
no.
So I think you're right. We've got a lot of things, but what's been funny, Andrew, this year is and I guess this is kind of human nature in many respects, right? If something gets taken away from you, you maybe find something like another alternative pretty quick, right? And you know, during COVID, we've had a lot of things that have been taken away from us. So face-to-face meetings have been replaced very efficiently, you know, by Zoom and Teams. Right. I think you mentioned it the other day, and it kind of, you know, rung very kind of true. You know, when you're trying to organize a meeting before, it'd be, right, are we meeting at your office? Are you meeting at our office? Are we meeting in a coffee shop? And that's been replaced by, are we meeting on Zoom? Are we meeting on Teams? Are we meeting on Google Meets? Right. And that's the conversation now. So look, you know, that was one thing that's come in and it's changed. Events. Okay. So things like, you know, events being cancelled. We've seen, I think, you know, a whole array of actual alternatives that companies have been testing, right?
Yeah.
You know, webinars, for example. You know, that's been kind of one area, and I guess you know, obviously this is a webinar that doesn't seem to go away, right? We kind of, you know, which was supposed to be a short-term thing, and it's kind of probably going forever now. But the point is you've also helped clients structure kind of webinar strategies and things like that. But how successful have those been? I mean, is that a viable long-term solution? So again, in 2021, is it that people should be doing more webinars, or what do you think?
I think it's a great question. I think that as soon as events, conferences, etc., physical spaces started to get cancelled, there was almost like this, oh, okay, we can't do that, so let's do this. You know, and I think some of those early webinars, and also I think even now, there is a skill associated to kind of, you know, getting somebody to attend a webinar first and foremost, but then also, you know, just signing up for it, right, or understanding it, or knowing about what it is. So I think we've seen transitions in, kind of when webinars first came out, they were kind of, okay, a few organizations are doing it. Most people are on lockdown, so perhaps their time was a bit, different, as it were. Their structure was displaced, so they hadn't worked out their own home schedule or home office schedule. So we saw kind of high uptake, and then we see a bit of a dip, and then see it come back. So it's not something that can kind of easily be replaced. I think that, we had a conversation with a client last week, and we said that, webinar is a good strategy, but it's one piece of a puzzle. It shouldn't be your kind of be all and end all, right? So, okay, I used to do events. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do online events, right? It shouldn't be a kind of cure-all, right? It should be consideration for sure, because we have seen tremendous success on kind of content creation, intelligent conversations, real kind of top of funnel, and then pulling people down into a nurturing program as far as marketing to individuals. But it has to be part of that puzzle, right? Not just a key component.
No, and I think that makes sense. I think the danger is when you're just looking for like replacements, when exactly. Actually the reality is it's not like for like. Okay, so from that, in the same respect, then conferences, right? So I guess what we've seen has been a kind of recent spate of virtual events, virtual conferences.
Yeah.
We spoke about one last week, right? With Inbound, right?
Inbound, yeah.
Same. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
I'll tell you what. The first virtual event I attended was the guys Marcus Sheridan Impact, and they put together a kind of 1 day event or one evening event, essentially in the States. Punchy, choppy, kind of 20-minute webinar sessions, live, real time, so real time audience interaction. Very early days, and I thoroughly enjoyed that. Right, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the content. I enjoyed the speakers. I enjoyed the setup, the simplicity associated to it. But I had no comparison, right? So I'd never been to one of their events before, so I didn't have any expectations. I think the challenge with like a huge event or a huge conference. I'll give you an example. So we used to go to the Social Media Marketing World conference. I got Michael Stelzner over in San Diego. We used to physically go there, and it reached a point where we just made the decision not to go. But I never jumped on the virtual package, right? Previously, I kind of never. I think because I've experienced it, and you have that the virtual experience. I don't think, and then look, we saw it firsthand. Last week at Inbound that. Tried their level best, I think, to make a physical event, in a virtual space. But I've seen some incredible tech. I've seen kind of guys present to us and say, look, this is now your virtual exhibition stand. It's your virtual coffee. This is, but I guess that some of those magical moments that you look back on, I don't know, and it may be because it's the first year, right, and we're all kind of getting used to it. But I felt like some of those magical moments would be pretty difficult to kind of recreate in the virtual space. I mean, how did you feel? Like, what was the, I mean, it's been a week on now, right? So I've got kind of real still mixed feelings about it. I mean, how do you feel?
Very similar. I think, look, the reality is we've been going there for years, and we know what it is from a kind of social perspective, a networking perspective, all of those things. But I think, like what you said, actually, if you've never been before, then last week was probably brilliant. But if you actually have been, then you probably hated it, right? And I think, and I think honestly, like everyone I've spoken to who's part of our kind of group of people that we kind of meet up with, nobody had a good experience of it. So I think that's challenging. I think, the technology is not bad though. I mean, so from a technology perspective, I think it works quite well. I think global conferences need to forget about running a global conference when it's virtual. Okay. Yeah. For me, that was a big fail on this because if you are running an event and you are expecting people to kind of log in from different time zones, well, actually, there's no real need, right? Because you can essentially run 4 different conferences across, 4 different sort of continents.
Time zones.
right? And time zones, and make it really kind of easy and accessible. Let's not try and kind of pigeonhole everything into one event. Yes, it's more work, but you know, there's no need for it. And I think we'll see that next year. You know, and actually one of the things, and again, look, because I know I recognize some of the faces, so some of the names watching this today, but from a B2B standpoint, the way of kind of, you know, digital exhibition booths and things like that, I quite like what I've seen so far, but it's not the same. So again, you've got to kind of put yourself in the shoes of the buyer, right? I guess if you're looking to kind of participate in these kind of events, if you're not looking at it from a buyer perspective, I think that's where you're potentially going to miss out on this. And one thing is, are the same, you know, those same buyers that turn up to big events and conferences, are they going to turn up to a virtual event? Is that same appeal there if they're not going to have a, you know, a drink with their friends that they see once a year? If they're not jumping on a plane, so they don't want to do it. I don't know. I mean, like, you know, there's definitely going to have an impact where, and I'll give you an example, because I think the keynote last week, Andrew, there's 27,000 people there last year at the event.
Yeah.
Right. For that same keynote, what was the highest number that you saw?
Touching 8,000, 8.5.
Right. There you go. Right. Yeah. And for an event where people don't have to travel to Boston to go to, global audience, but you've got less than a third of the people actually tuning in online to watch the most important session, right? So I think when you look at it from that perspective, you've got to, you know, it's not, again, from an exhibitor perspective, like I said, from a kind of buyer perspective, or a seller perspective, you've got to be very careful, because it's not a like-for-like replacement. And actually, one of the things I've seen, which drives me nuts, is these guys that are hosting conferences are basically trying to charge the same amount for a virtual exhibition booth as they are for a virtual, as they would for a physical booth. I mean, they got to get real, because they're going to kill their own businesses, and they're going to kill the industry before it even starts. I mean, it's daft. You know, so I think those kind of things are going to have to change, and I think
it's funny.
Change.
I almost liken that to, you know, advertising agencies when that shift started to happen to digital, and they'd essentially been, you know, just absolutely charging exorbitant pricing for, you know, outdoor media and traditional media, you know, and as soon as something became trackable, it was like, oh wow, hold on a minute, it's a tenth of the cost. Well, no, let's keep it high. Let's kind of keep those rates high. Let's keep everything high, and I think it just doesn't work. I think the other thing with events as well to consider is that a lot of the time people using events like that, as you said, that one time a year to meet customers, to reach out to them, to, you know, see new faces. But now this we don't have to wait a year, you know, because we've had that global kind of fallout. The ability to say, let's jump on a Zoom call is fairly straightforward now, right? It's not anything before where definitely there was a reluctance to jump on here. There was a reluctance globally. They just didn't happen.
Yeah, mate, actually, you bring up a good point there, right? Because I think if we kind of take that on one step further, I think what it gives us access to today is maybe a global customer base, right?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, whereas that possibly wouldn't have been the case before, because again, you know, you work with people within your locality, within your own country, whatever that looks like. But again, today, there's no difference between, you know, a guy in Chicago jumping on Zoom with another guy in Chicago, or jumping on Zoom with us, right?
Yeah.
Totally. I mean, really, what's the difference? And I think that's, you know, that's pretty interesting, because now if you do have, you know, essentially a global playing field, then your marketing really should be adapted for that as well.
Yeah, you've got to realize that, you know, when you're looking at your competitive set, when you're looking at trying to understand, okay, from, you know, marketing to new prospects, who else could potentially approach them? And I think the thing is, you know, I think we've witnessed this firsthand. The conversations that we're having at the moment, you know, the Middle East is still very much seen as kind of cherry picking, as far as, you know, from technology companies to other companies, you know, and they're looking at this space and they're like, well, you know, we it's cool, right? We don't need to come over. We don't need to fly in for a week. which they traditionally do. Perhaps if they'd organize some meetings, they'd fly in for a week, they'd have those meetings, they disappear, they try and prospect. Don't need to do that, right? Running some campaigns, getting some conversations going, see where they're going. So you have that ability to even test the market before even, perhaps you want to kind of, get boots on the ground, and that's fine. But you now have this acceptance that somebody will go, yeah, let's schedule a call, easy.
Well, actually, look, I mean, Andrew, it also brings up another point, right? Because I guess it, if you've now got a global playing field, right, from which you can sort of target, so do your competitors, right? So now you've also 100%. Got maybe a global competitor base. It's true, though, right?
Exactly.
I mean, it's and I think that I think will be interesting, because again, it's going to come down to, more than just relationships now.
Yeah, no, look, I think that presents, more of an opportunity. Right, so it does present more of an opportunity. If you realize that honestly the cuffs are off, or we're the boundaries are just kind of lowering, right? As far as having that initial conversation, and that's what's always difficult about acquiring new customers. It's that first touch point, right? It's that kind of having a conversation with them. This is really what. This is what really kind of, I think, has the biggest impact, because there is opportunity out there now. The ability, I mean, even down to educational opportunity. When I did this webinar to a whole host of students, a lot of them were reaching out and saying, well, with the kind of state of what's going on, where's the opportunities? And I was like, everywhere. Right, because from a remote hiring perspective, people are realizing you don't have to be in a physical location to understand, dynamically what you can offer, right? Because at the end of the day, you're offering a product or service. Now, obviously, we're talking about products and services that translate well globally, right? We obviously have a mixed audience, and kind of everyone that watches this or listens to it now as well is mixed, right? So, but essentially, there's massive opportunity now. And that has to be considered, because whereas there may be, as we said before, people thinking, I'll just hit the reset button on marketing, I'll kind of jig around some numbers, you may want to consider an entire new geographical region to approach with a particular product or a particular service, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, market feasibility and things like that now are just infinitely easier, right? So yeah, it makes total sense. Andrew, I think, we've got about 15 minutes left. I think let's look at the kind of channels, the different kind of strategies. I think I think we might have to kind of whiz our way through this, because we've kind of gone over time a little bit. But, in terms of, if we kind of look at this now, everything we're talking about potentially is digital. Does that mean that people should just be focusing all of their attention, all of their budgets just on digital marketing then?
I think that we have to go back to and be considerate of the fact that what happens essentially, what's the usage, right? So how are people using that digital space now? Are people using that digital space more? Are people on their phones more? Are people on their laptops, their iPads? Where they can see digital advertising, has that increased? I mean, I'd say yes, right? So I think there's an increased audience base. I think there's people that were perhaps not technology savvy before, just from, if we go to grassroots kids that are now learning from home, right? The parents, those parents that were like, oh, technology, I just don't get it. Well, guess what? You had to, because, the fact is that if you didn't, your kids weren't learning. So I think you've got new audiences that are jumping on, in that digital space. So I'd say that I'd look at digital as quite frankly, the most important. That doesn't necessarily mean that you don't still activate certain things as obviously other things become available and open up. But we do have the challenge of another potential lockdown, right? What do you think? I mean, as far as kind of that.
So again, going back to, look, whatever you do, just stay nimble and fluid. Now, if that's digital focused, look, it makes sense. I think from a B2B perspective specifically, yes. Because I think you've got to go back to objectives, and the objectives really, again, for most businesses are really going to focus still around kind of brand awareness, product awareness, and then lead generation, right? And especially in that kind of B2B world. B2C is just much more challenging because, again, they're going to be much more sort of susceptible or impacted by lockdowns or anything like that, right?
Yeah.
From a B2B sense, things can still continue to an extent. Obviously, contingent on the business. But look, I think data's key. So again, I think if you're going to be marketing in this environment, you've got to basically understand the impact of every single touch point, right? Every single piece of marketing that you do, especially if we look at next year, marketing budgets are declining, like what we've already said. If that continues into the following year, because this huge recession that we were supposed to be right in the middle of right now, right? But we're always sort of predicting pre-COVID. Well, we've still not really seen that, right? I mean, there's still that's potentially still in the works. So I think now's the time to really kind of double down on making sure that whatever you're doing is very much kind of data focused. It's tracking, it's understanding return on investment wherever possible, return on engagement. I mean, literally, if you can find a metric that makes sense for your business based on the channel, then I think that makes sense. And I think for me that would lean naturally more towards kind of digital marketing and digital channels, just because of the access and availability to that data. But it doesn't have to be just digital.
Yeah, no, and look, there's wide availability as well. So I mean, even if you go into Google and type Google Trends, right? So you'll see, there's another great site is thinkwithgoogle.com, and you can customize that to your region as well. And they offer up a whole host of wealth of information and data around search trends, right? And how they've changed, and what the dynamics are of that around B2B and B2C. And this is freely available. So I think back to your kind of data-driven point, there's information there that people are kind of blissfully unaware of, right? And if you're not, I mean, the amount of conversations that I have, with organizations that frankly don't have any tracking mechanism on any of their digital touch points. Zero. Do you have even something as basic as Google Analytics, which is 2 lines of code? No. Oh no, I don't know. Don't know where my traffic is. I don't know where people are coming from. I don't know. And I think obviously that, or even just a deep dive into customer data, right? Do you understand your customers? Where are they coming from? Where have they spent their money? How much are they spending? All these kinds of things. Those simple metrics, like you said, translate offline just as well as online, right?
Yeah.
To understand that.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned a good point there as well. So, we do kind of talk a lot about kind of digital foundations and things that need to be in place. And we say it all the time, but honestly, we still come across companies that don't have any kind of digital foundations, or again, as simple as when was the last time they updated their website? When was the last time they added new content to the website? When was the last time, again, how they adapted these kind of digital touch points, to what essentially is I hate saying the new normal, but it is what it is, right? This is kind of here to stay. And for those companies that haven't, again, changed or adapted or updated any of these kind of, digital assets, I mean, that's a problem. So again, making sure those foundations are fully in place, as well as relevant, right? It's got to be relevant to today, so if your messaging doesn't take into account what's going on around us, well, does that mean you're kind of out of touch, right? And who wants to work with a company that's out of touch? So,
completely.
Right. I think it's very simple stuff, right? I think we've got to kind of almost humanize that digital side of things, and just make sure that actually whatever if you're using digital channels to communicate, make sure it's real, right? Make sure it makes sense.
Yeah, and look, we've said, previously that the mechanism of finding new companies, new business, new brands, products and services has now pretty much all been driven online, right? So whereas you would perhaps go to an exhibition or a conference and you'd walk around, you grab a coffee, you'd have a bit of a sandwich, you'd step over, oh, what about this company? I don't know these guys, right? That's disappeared. So where is it? It's Google, right? That's where people are going, right? Their first point of contact is Google or through social, and then at that point they're landing on your website, right? We've said it in the past. Even that you've got to be relevant. As you said, if you're talking about something that is blind to the current environment, why would I want to work with you, right?
Yeah. No, very true. I think kind of the next piece of this is still content for me. So again, we kind of touched on this, but the ability to sort of create content, whatever that looks like. So from our perspective, obviously we do a lot of kind of writing and that kind of stuff. Doesn't need to be. So if you're happy getting on a 10-minute kind of call and recording it, or doing a webinar like this, for example, but creating sort of good quality educational, informative content. Again, funnily enough, I mean, last week we spoke about email, and
And
if you guys didn't watch last week's show, go back and check it out on our Nexa website, because basically there was one session at HubSpot at the conference a week before, right? And they were talking about how email has changed by comparing, I think, 200 million emails and the data from those emails between March and August, right? So 200 emails in March, 200 million emails in August, right? And people are spending 20% more time in their inboxes now than what they were in March, right? People are opening more emails now than what they were in March, right? People are spending more time on those emails now than they were in March. So again, content, again, there's some very kind of cheap, cost-effective, quick and easy ways of communicating with people. Test it, right? Take advantage of every single sort of communication channel. And then when you are creating this content, an email content can be used perhaps in multiple ways. This webinar content, obviously we record this every week. It goes onto our website. We now convert it into a podcast.
YouTube.
Yeah, it's up on YouTube. We even take snippets from, every now and then me and Andrew say something remotely intelligent. And so when that happens, we try and cut that snippet out and place it on the website. And we've done that as well, right? Where we like that, but again, if you're creating content, think about the different kind of ways that you can use it. But yeah, I don't know. I think content's like hugely important.
And it hasn't gone away. And relevant content, right? Relevant. Just create that relevancy. You've got an opportunity to really, kind of tap into your audience, and look, help them out, right? I mean, honestly, we do this show because we enjoy it, right? We genuinely enjoy it. It's fun. We look forward to it every week. Obviously in the early days, we were amazed and kind of humbled by the response that we got, and we continue to kind of get. But it's only a couple of weeks ago that we said, well, hold on a minute, why don't we put this on a podcast, right? That makes sense. And then, well, why don't we put this up on YouTube and kind of repurpose some of this content to help people find it as well, right? So we're kind of making those discoveries as well.
Yeah, it's fine, right? It's fine to figure stuff out as you go along. Although, again, it's new for all of us, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, we can't go without talking about social, Andrew. So from a social media perspective, again, we've had some debates on this because it's quite interesting. But again, how important is social moving into 2021?
Yeah, I guess it all goes around usage. I think for those of you kind of watching live now, and then obviously pre-record and then post-recording, and then listening on a podcast, just ask yourself, how are you engaged on social now? I perhaps it's just a set of friends that I keep, but there's been a kind of reduction in I'd say Instagram usage, an increase in LinkedIn, in some cases an increase in TikTok because it's just an absolute time waster. And then obviously people have been using the platform slightly differently. So I think there's a hunger or a thirst for knowledge or question and answers. And I've seen a lot more people jumping on like Facebook groups and asking questions and trying to get the collective, the village elders to kind of, help out in some of these difficult life decisions, right? So I'd say that it still has, importance and relevancy. It's still a place where you need to, be active. You just to make sure that you're active in the right way.
Yeah. It's funny because, I think there's 2 points here. Active, but also make sure if you're kind of relying on data, make sure you're relying on the right data and kind of relevant, fresh data. It's funny because this kind of, spending less time on Instagram, it's unbelievable the amount of people that I speak to who say, never really used to spend more than 10 minutes a week on LinkedIn. Used to spend maybe 70% of my social media time on Instagram, maybe 10%, 15% on Facebook, and maybe the rest, on LinkedIn, right? Or Twitter, or whatever. And today, every business professional I speak to is saying that they are now spending more and more time on LinkedIn. To the point where they're saying, actually, I'm just on Instagram as much as I am on Facebook. And it's funny, I had this kind of closed group, informal roundtable last week with drinks, where we kind of all discussed this, and maybe not a roundtable officially, but basically, went around the room, and it was like, went around the room, and I was like, guys, like, where are you spending your time? And everyone was like 70%, 80% on LinkedIn, whereas previously they were like always on Instagram. We used to just lose hours on Instagram, and I think that kind of goes into all of that kind of, well, actually, you're likely to learn things possibly on LinkedIn, right? There's content that, there's educational content, there's there's insights, there's things that might help you because we all need help right now. Rather than kind of just, scrolling through, nice pictures on Instagram or whatever. But I think that's significant. So guys, if you are going to get 2021 strategies for social media, try and look at data that's fresh and relevant in the last couple of months, right? Don't bait, there's so much social media data out there, but don't rely on January 2020 data to make 2021 predictions, because it's completely irrelevant today. So I think that's super important as well. Yeah. Last couple of points, Andrew. So from my perspective, guys, again, whatever you do, we've spoken about the data-driven side of things, but tracking is key. So look at investing in tracking tools. If you need help with tracking tools, honestly, reach out to me and Andrew, because we're happy to kind of help you kind of understand what works and what doesn't work from a kind of tracking perspective. There's a million tools out there, but literally some are significantly better than others. But again, any kind of final thoughts, Andrew?
I think obviously, because we're nipping into the hour, which we like to pull it in tight for the hour. I think everything that we kind of covered today can pretty much be summed up in a phrase that we use quite a lot, and that's customer centric. So understanding how your customer and how your prospect has changed over the last 8-9 months will help you determine how to target those individuals in 2021. So it's crucial to get as much information, as much data as you can on that customer, and have a customer-centric approach. I think that's really, really where the focus needs to be.
Yeah, I could agree more. I think you're totally right. I think that's a great place to end it. Andrew, it's been great. And actually, sorry, before we close off, a big shout out to Thomas Williams, actually, because he's actually been watching us from day one. We don't get as much beard love from him as we used to, which I'm perfectly fine with. But Thomas, Sally's, a few of you guys who literally just tune in so regularly. So again, thanks to you guys, because honestly, that kind of encourages us to keep going, and you guys are very sort of complimentary of what we're trying to do here, which is really kind of have a good discussion and chat and try and help people.
Yeah, definitely. That's amazing. Happy birthday, tribal elder. That's amazing. That's definitely what Amit is going to be known as now. So I highly appreciate that, Thomas. It's usually directed at me, so thank you for that, buddy. Listen. So obviously we mentioned before, we're up there on YouTube. If you want to catch the previous shows, we've got a dedicated page on on our website. We are now obviously across all of the kind of podcast sphere, as it were. You can even, by tomorrow evening, you can even ask your Alexa to play the Digital Growth Show. So that'd be quite novel, I think, from tomorrow. So same time next week, Amit. I think, what are we talking about? The second part of the 2021 series, right?
Yeah, which is going to be focusing on digital sales because look, it's here to stay. We've got tons of insights over the last sort of 6 months, and again, really kind of helping people plan sales strategies, right? So, marketing strategies are the thing that a lot of people focus on, but sales strategies less so. And again, I think it is a case of, ripping up what you did or what you'd planned maybe this time last year and starting with a blank canvas for 2021. So yeah, actually, pretty excited about what that show will be like. Yeah.
Good stuff. Excellent. Well, thank you to everyone again for watching, listening. Reach out to us on LinkedIn. You can always give us a shout. Actually, if you want to link out an email, I'm Andrew@digitalnexa.com. Amit is Amit@digitalnexa.com. You can always reach us out to us directly. Happy to have a chat. So yeah, enjoy the rest of your week. See you everyone. Bye, Amit.
Great. Thanks, guys. Take care.